Tere hommikut, lugupeetud kolleegid, head külalised. Riigikogu Väliskomisjoni korraldusel on siis täna hommikul siin Riigikogu konverentsisaalis toimumas lühiseminar Kagu-Aasia ja Eesti teemadel, suhetel. See on teataval määral järg siis laiemale teemakäsitlusele, mida Riigikogu Väliskomisjon on selle parlamendi koosseisu ajal süvendatult uurinud ja poliitilist debatti arendanud Eestis, mis puudutab siis Eesti vaadet Aasiale tervikuna. Ja tänase seminari selline kitsam teema ja keskendumine just nimelt Kagu-Aasia riikidele on ennekõike seotud sellega, et ka siin viimasel ajal on Riigikogu nii Väliskomisjonil kui ka meie sõprusrühmadel, eriti siis meie Tai sõprusrühmal olnud konkreetseid või äsja toimunud visiite riikidesse. Väliskomisjon oli aprilli alguses siis visiidil Singapuris ja Indoneesias. Me oleme seda Väliskomisjoni koosolekul ka nii-öelda hilisemalt arutanud neid järelmeid ja edasisi samme ja samamoodi ka meie sõprusrühm Tai külaskäigu kohta on andnud väga põhjaliku ja hea ülevaate ja ma usun, et tänane teemaarendus siis läbi meie väga põnevate külalisesinejate kindlasti annab täiendavat ainest mõtisklusteks, kuidas nendel teemadel edasi liikuda. Et tänane lühiseminar on siis avatud kõigile, see peaks olema ka nähtav meie veebi otseülekandes. Kuna mitte kõik siis meie külalisesinejad täna ei valda eesti keelt sellisel määral, et me saaksime rahulikku debatti pidada, siis ma teen ettepaneku, kui kolleegid vastu ei ole, siis me jätkaksime meie arutelu nüüd inglise keeles ja ma annaksin esimese ettekandena sõna Tallinna Ülikooli teadurile Karin Deanile, et ma palun, et kõik võib-olla me esinejad jääksid ajaraami kuni 15 minutit, 15 maksimum 20 minutit, et me jõuaksime kindlasti kella 11-ks tänase seminari nagu peetud. I would like to give the first floor to Karin Dean to begin, and then the Trino will follow, and then Vlad will conclude, and then we have a Q&A session after that. Please, Karin.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I will quickly proceed to my presentation and say 2 words about myself too. I'm from Tallinn University. I've been a researcher in Southeast Asian studies since 2007. Before that, I lived in Southeast Asia for 12 years and worked for an international conflict resolution organization working on Myanmar and southern Thailand. The title of today, Southeast Asia Opportunities for Asia, for Estonia, yeah, is a big, I'm not going to lay out what the opportunities for Estonia are because it's out of the scope, but keeping that in mind, this is what I want to say below. How does EU look from Southeast Asia? I will mostly talk about geopolitics, the elementary developments, and particularly the developments in 2012, important developments in geopolitics, and then say a few words about ASEAN states and about Myanmar as this has become a topic. How does EU look from Southeast Asia? I think it's good to try to imagine how EU may look from Southeast Asia. From Southeast Asia, EU is smaller and it is more fragmented than ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which has only 10 countries. Those are larger, most of them. And the territory of ASEAN is slightly larger than EU, and the population is about 1 Germany more in ASEAN states. Second point, EU is not a strategic player in traditional security issues. However, the rise of China currently tops the ASEAN agenda, and it is at the core of how ASEAN manages its external relations with major powers. EU is a rather distant dialogue partner, but useful in strengthening its capacity as a coherent regional community, and I talk about here ASEAN. I keep in mind ASEAN community, the aim, one of the aims in set up in ASEAN. There are lessons to be learned from EU. In trade, EU is the third largest, EU, 27 countries together, lumped together, is the third largest external trade partner in trade value. China is first, Japan is second, and EU is slightly followed by just slightly by the US. However, EU is the most important single market for certain ASEAN countries, while the US is the most important market for other ASEAN countries, and Japan for, you can see from the slide. So, role of geopolitics, I would like to stress two important processes or points. First, the successful institutionalization of Southeast Asia as ASEAN. Southeast Asia means SEA, Southeast Asia as ASEAN, which is a regional bloc, and its strategic location. And the other important point, rise of China and the US policy of return to Southeast Asia. So first talking about successful institutionalization of ASEAN. ASEAN, important point to make here is that ASEAN really is 6 countries, if we talk about the percentage of GDP and the population. And most of these countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, are also the founding members of ASEAN. The other states have joined later. Southeast Asia as a region has been institutionalized by the Southeast Asian nations. Southeast ASEAN then, ASEAN has started to set its own agenda and play a central role in world geopolitics through various ASEAN-led regional frameworks, from ASEAN Regional Forum to ASEAN +3 to the East Asia Summit, which leaders' summits are usually held back-to-back with the annual ASEAN summits. What I mean here in an ASEAN member state, this means that these political diplomatic events bring the most important world geopolitical actors to Southeast Asia, because the meetings alternate in different countries. And I have no time to go into how ASEAN has managed to do that. Well, just short, ASEAN can talk to all the major powers. So ASEAN is a grouping that has managed to bring together the Chinese, Indian, Russian, and US presidents. Rise of China. China, this is a challenge from economic to military to cultural spheres for Southeast Asia. If we talk about the rise of China in Europe, if we can feel it, then it does not require wild imagination to think about what it may feel in Southeast Asia that borders China. Southeast Asia has also had history of connections with China that are not benign. And here I keep in mind the pre-colonial China-imposed imperial tribute system and the support of Southeast Asian communist insurgencies in mid-20th century. China has always considered Southeast Asia as its historical backyard and traditional sphere of influence. However, the most recent development, the relationship between China and ASEAN has changed drastically, and it is generally tended to be viewed as benign because China is expanding its influence in Southeast Asia through trade, business ties, integration of infrastructure. There have been a lot of road and railway links built. And many Southeast Asian nations have benefited from this. Most of these developments, overland developments, are taking place in Laos and in northern Myanmar. And we can talk about the lease of land, extraction of natural resources, introduction of cash crops to great dependence on markets and on China. And there is a huge socio-cultural impact. And this has led to a lot of resentments in Burma, Myanmar, and in Laos. And there is a threat, kind of a danger perceived of China taking over. I'm not going to talk about on economic level. Another important part about China's expansion, China in Southeast Asia, is the South China Sea and conflict. And I'm not going to talk about the conflict, but just only make the point that China has been very assertive, aggressively behaving in relation to South China Sea. And the developments, by the developments in 2012, I mean certain statements that have taken place in ASEAN summits, where ASEAN leaders have not been able to come up with a joint statement because of interference from China. So we can say that China is openly undermining ASEAN unity. So ASEAN external relations are now focused on managing this new geopolitics of increasing rivalry between China and the US in Southeast Asia. And I'm just going to talk about the US in Southeast China. But I will say in advance that the battlefield is Myanmar. That's why I also focus on Myanmar a little bit more. Myanmar, or Burma as it is more widely known perhaps, is has been labeled widely the client state of China. And it has managed to get Western support, as we all know. We talk about Burma now a lot, and Burma opening up and democratizing. So this may lead to a new collision between Washington and Beijing for this reason, Burma opening up, or the US presence in Burma. And I will come to this in a few. But first, few words about US policy of return to Southeast Asia. It has been labeled as the first, the US government since the inauguration of President Barack Obama administration has shown commitment to Southeast Asia region. US is currently in the process of shifting resources and capability from the Middle East and South Asia to Asia Pacific region. It has been described as the first serious US engagement in Southeast Asia since the end of the Vietnam War. And the same, how China perceives this, it is the second US containment policy on China. The first was Cold War. And interestingly here, according to sources in Washington, US President Barack Obama's administration has made Myanmar one of its top foreign policy priorities, to the extent that there will be some military collaboration between the US and Myanmar. Now imagine the army that has been, Myanmar army that has been accused of a lot of human rights abuses. Yeah. This was unthinkable even 3 years ago. Well, what is interesting also is that while US in general, we can say, has reaffirmed its alliances with the earlier partners like Thailand, the Philippines, and so on, but Myanmar is the only example of how the US has managed to expand its influence at the expense of China. So that's new, that's recent. What ASEAN wants from EU? Putting EU in perspective before as the third largest trade partner only, and not as a strategic, not as of that high strategic priority as a partner. What ASEAN wants from EU? I have 2 points, and one is the EU develop resources, know-how of conflict prevention, crisis management, peace building, and the other one is expertise in building connectivity, particularly in the area. These 2 points that I'm highlighting, what EU wants from, what ASEAN wants from EU, come from Dr. Yeo's paper, EU Center in Singapore, that he has pointed out. EU experience in connections and with ASEAN, building ASEAN community. In Tallinn University, for example, 2 days ago, we had a delegation from Thailand, and they were very much interested. They were in very great detail. They were trying to find out how the credit system of transfer credits between universities works, and they emphasized that we are going to have ASEAN community, and they want to learn everything. So this kind of expertise. So if there are any businessmen under the topic Estonia's what Estonia can do in Southeast Asia, this is just one of the interesting list of ease of doing business. I picked up the countries in Southeast Asia, and for comparison also have China there. In this ranking, Estonia ranks 21st, Latvia 25th, Lithuania 27th, Finland 11th, Germany 20th. So at least according to this ranking for businessmen, it is easier to do business in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand than in Germany, for example, or Estonia. Also, the summary of what Estonia can do in Southeast Asia, it's a big region, as I emphasized, very diverse. So definitely there is no answer fits all solution. But the fact is that European companies are underinvested in Southeast Asian emerging markets. And 2 points I want to bring out is a young population and huge potential for the development of retail and e-commerce. Indonesia is one of the most popular countries in the world, with a very large middle class and the most democratic country, as it is considered at the moment in Southeast Asia, full of opportunities. About Myanmar, this is my last slide. Myanmar's, we can say, I'm arguing that Myanmar's reform process was never what it seemed, nor was the West's response to it. The thaw in Myanmar-West relationship has been initiated by the Myanmar generals, the same who are at power today. So we can consider whether they have changed mind and they want to democratize, or what has changed is the discourse on Burma. And I argue that the discourse has changed much more than there are real changes in Burma. There is documentation of discrete signals for more positive relations from Myanmar to the US, and for the US to openly engage in Myanmar, some signs of reform were needed to justify its new policies. We all know that this liberalization came after what was by any measure very rigid elections in 2010 that introduced government in the public, in the media discourse. It's very often called military-backed civilian government, and some facts about this government at the moment. Let me stop here because we will hear more about Myanmar next. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin, and I will give the floor now to Triinu Püvi. Please, Triinu.
Hello, my name is Triinu Püvi, and I'm a PhD student in Tallinn University. My research area is actually two minority groups, civil societies in Burma, Myanmar, and therefore today I will speak about civil societies in Southeast Asia and more closely concentrate on the facilitation of peace process in Myanmar. So let me begin. Southeast Asia is a very contrasting region with major differences in development and income levels between countries, between the urban and rural areas, between different population groups, and between genders. A high level of economic development has led to a reduction in the number of poor people. However, millions of people still live below poverty line. Also, rapid urbanization has put considerable strain on natural resources and ecosystems. Insufficient protection of human rights and widespread corruption are evident in most of the countries. Many of the economic, social, and environmental problems in the region can be explained by poor governance and weak capacity of government institutions and by the limited influence of civil society. Asia is still home to multiple political systems. Obviously, there are a wide variation in the conception of civil society and in the attitude of governments and political leaders to civil society organizations. Viewing civil society organizations as a positive force in the advancement of democracy, some Southeast Asian governments have instituted rules and rights to facilitate the development of a sphere of organization and governance that is independent of the state. Civil society organizations in these countries have been actively involved in drafting and ratifying new constitutions, monitoring elections, maintaining oversight of the state, and supervising governments. It includes media being critical of the state, religious groups resisting state interference, ethnic minorities demanding more equalities, and etc. International non-governmental organizations in these countries may directly work with local NGOs and civil society organizations in conducting democratic trainings and education for grassroots people. In all Southeast Asian countries, increasing number of NGOs are active in many areas of public welfare, variously tolerated or even appreciated by the state because of they supplement inadequate state programs. Other governments have adopted a more negative attitude, viewing non-state organizations as a cause of instability and an obstacle to their visions and policies. These governments seek to suppress, if not eliminate, the space and role of such organizations. And still other governments seek to limit, penetrate, control, and manipulate civil society organizations for their own benefit. Among these can be listed, for example, Vietnam, Laos, Brunei, and Burma. All in all, it can be concluded that civil society sector in Southeast Asia varies, though trend has been towards more open and stronger civil societies in all countries. Also, governments in the region have started to take civil society organizations more seriously and involve them more in various decision-making processes. International non-governmental organizations, with their practices and also funding, have been great influence to the civil societies in Southeast Asia. In the second part of my presentation, I will concentrate on Myanmar's civil society and its relation to the peace process in the country. Few years ago, Myanmar still had a military-led government, being one of the least developed countries in the world. Though today things seem to be changed, however, the question remains about the actual changes in the country. So, since the 1990s, civil society in Myanmar has undergone a gradual re-emergence. Not too long ago, observers and donors were asking whether civil society even existed in Myanmar. Since the new government took power in 2011, the space for civil and political society has again expanded dramatically. Since then, the question is not anymore whether there is a civil society or not. Commentary has shifted towards mapping this dynamic sector and discussion of which actor to engage with and how. Although such deliberations have sometimes proceeded according to a rather simplistic understanding of civil society, they nevertheless represent a positive development. However, such a picture represents only one side of a coin, as Myanmar's internal political stability is still far from stable and peaceful. Recently, preliminary ceasefires have been agreed or reconfirmed between the government and most significant non-state armed groups representing different minority groups. Currently, there is still one major ethnic group and its military organization called Kachin Independence Army at war with Myanmar's army. Meaning that there is unsettled dispute over people and territory in northern part of Myanmar and martial law present. If local and international organizations were previously involved in civil society activities, such as improvement of education, healthcare system, and protection of environment, it quickly changed, and now most of the international non-governmental organizations are actually involved in accommodation of peace process in Myanmar. The peace process and the reforms underway over the past 2 years in Myanmar remain fragile and incomplete, however, and many stakeholders remain understandably skeptical regarding the true intention of government, and in particular Myanmar's army. However, in order to succeed, the peace process must be broadened and deepened. The relationship between business interests and the peace process is hugely important, but still until today under-examined. The political economy of both armed conflict and peace in Myanmar involves significant economic interests on the part of both government and non-state armed groups actors. If such concerns are not addressed, the grievances of local communities and the advocacy groups seeking to represent them are likely to increase in relation to the peace business nexus. So, is Myanmar the new NGO heaven? Yes and no. On the one hand, every month, some international and non-governmental organization announces their new project in Myanmar, and there is a lot of work to be done. On the other hand, socio-political climate is still fragile, and political reforms are in theory more spoken of than in practice implemented. It is true that government and President Thein Sein welcome international non-governmental organizations and are talking about building up and strengthening civil society in Myanmar. However, at the same time, they keep close eye on the sector and civil society organizations. In other words, civil society is still strictly under government's control, though in recent years the spectrum of activities has increased greatly. In conclusion, given the essentially indigenous nature of the peace process in Myanmar, the role of the international community in the context is crucial and essential. It includes the need to ensure free and fair elections scheduled for 2015 and to support the establishment of effective governance and rule of law. For the peace process to be sustainable and deepened, it is also essential that members of the ethnic Burman or Pamar community gain better understandings of the grievances and realities of their minority fellow citizens. Also, international stakeholders should continue to remind the government their commitments and responsibilities under international human rights and humanitarian law, of the need to resolve outstanding armed conflicts, ultimately with an aim of a substantial political settlement acceptable to all parties, including minority groups. And I'm going to finish up with the Estonian third sector development cooperation and perhaps the opportunities in the region. Estonian NGO sector do have contacts with most Southeast Asian civil societies. Few Estonian NGOs work with NGOs in the region, mainly sending volunteers and participating in multi-party programs with other NGOs from the EU and Nordic countries. However, there are only few one-to-one projects between Estonia and Southeast Asian countries. And according to Estonian Roundtable for Development Cooperation, only one Estonian organization is currently working on the development cooperation in Southeast Asia alone, and they're based in the Philippines. And the only NGO known which has worked in Myanmar, Estonian NGO, has been the Estonian Debating Society, which helped to establish a debating society in Myanmar recently. None of the Southeast Asian countries are a development cooperation priority countries, partner countries for Estonia, although by figures they could be. In terms of third sector development cooperation with Southeast Asian countries, there are strong arguments why Estonian NGOs have conducted so few projects in the region. Mainly the lack of Estonian embassies in the region, too little know-how of the socio-political and cultural climate there, and the problem with communication in local languages. Although diplomatic relations were established between Estonia and Myanmar in 2012, it should be stressed that socio-political changes are still fragile and the country is in transition phase. In terms of small-scale cooperation with Myanmar's civil society, it can only be welcomed if regime transition and democratic changes can be supported through this. However, with large-scale projects, the advice would be to wait and see how 2015 elections go in Myanmar, and with the stabilization of the political system, governmental and private sector cooperation in building stronger cultural and economic relations are recommended thereupon. That would be all from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Triinu, for a very interesting presentation. And now, to conclude, Vlad Vernigorov from Tallinn Technical University. Please, Vlad.
Thank you. Probably I'll give just a moment. I'll get it. Oh, can we make it wide? Ah, here we go. Is it wide enough? Okay. Lugupeetud daamid ja härrad, mul on suur au seista siin parlamendis teie ees ja kasutada haruldast võimalust teiega sõbralikult mõtteid vahetada. Ma olen Tallinna Tehnikaülikooli rahvusvaheliste suhete ja diplomaatia õppejõud. Uus-meremaalasena olen ma väga teadmishimuline. Ent ka eestlased on teadmishimulised. Meie ühise huvi objektiks on Aasia ja Vaikse ookeani piirkond. Vabandage, kuid ma tegelikult ei oska eesti keelt. That's why the presentation will have to be in English. Talking Asia Pacific, should Estonia contribute to this debate? Probably better to start with this little slide on why this presentation. Basically, coming from New Zealand to Estonia, I can feel that, especially from the Asia-Pacific region, I can feel that we are getting in the line with this red-hot debate on Asia-Pacific, on how to perceive Asia-Pacific region and how to understand. Do they know about us? What do we know about this vast region? And obviously this, thankfully for presentations and for opportunities like this, we can trigger discussions. I think this is probably the main cause for all of us to meet. Then we shouldn't really treat Asia-Pacific as just an emerging economic hub, because it is really the case of being a fertile ground for institution building process, because institutions are getting formalized and new frameworks are getting established, and we really need to know about this in depth. Then we should make an attempt to eliminate some dynamics that go on in the Asia-Pacific region, and perhaps this will be again linked to the fact that, to the necessity for us to have some kind of knowledge and get engaged in the process of Europe-Asia-Pacific collaboration. And last but not least, we really should frame Estonia as active as well as very productive involvement in the process. When we talk, we think that we are known, as Europeans, we think that we are known in Asia, and indeed it is the case. The European Union is, in fact, perceived over there as a big laboratory for where the diffusion of ideas are going on, and this is all in conjunction with the process of socialization. So there was no, I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no high-profile meeting in Asia-Pacific to take place without mentioning the European Union, its experiences, and things like that. But of course, what is Asia-Pacific? I shouldn't have done this in PDF, in PowerPoint rather than PDF, because it's just getting a little bit annoying. So what's Asia-Pacific? Asia-Pacific is large, and will not be going in political geography, you know what it is. But Asia-Pacific, in fact, looks very, very diverse, because you can see shots like Singapore or Jakarta. Oh, this is my little place, probably a couple of minutes from where I live. It's about 50 kilometers from Auckland, and this is, well, you know what it is. That's the Oz. Go figures. We shouldn't really go too much into figures, because everybody knows that the economy is even in the doom-gloom situation. The economic situation is not incredibly nice, but at the same time the figures show, and the Moody's analytical estimates, they show that they are pretty well on track, even including Japan. But do they know about us? And how do they know, and what do they know? An interesting example from the Asia-Pacific region, I bet as Estonians you should know this incredibly famous personality, Ortviin Sarapuu. Unfortunately, he had to lose last U when he moved to New Zealand as a World War II refugee, just to become New Zealand's greatest ever chess player, winning about 20 chess championships in a row, and participating for New Zealand in quite a few Olympiads. And again, Asia-Pacific, things haven't changed since 1957, to be perfectly honest, because, back in 57, Sarapuu was perceived in Australia, after he won the title of the Open Aussie, that he was perceived as a New Zealand Maori, and that's the fact. That's from his memoirs. As another example, the university I came from, the University of Canterbury, it does a global project on EU perceptions worldwide, including within the Asia-Pacific region, and they made zillions of surveys everywhere, asking elite representatives, elites from all circles, business, politics, everywhere. And I always give this example to my students because it's just a remarkable example. Once they approached a high-profile politician from Thailand with a simple question: when you think Europe, what does the first thing come to your mind? And this guy said, David Beckham. So we are perceived very, very differently in Asia Pacific. But do we understand them? Just a nice picture of somebody who was during my conference in Adelaide. This looks like a European or looking student is just basically facing the eternity, and do understand. Narrowing the task, the previous presenters specified that I think Asean and all those mathematical pluses, it's probably the better way to not make that too broad. I think we should start somewhere and stop somewhere. So ASEAN and ASEAN plus 3. Unfortunately, those 3 characters are no longer on the top, but nevertheless they are replaced by somebody else anyway. So the China, South Korea, and Japan, as well as ASEAN +6, including India, Australia, and New Zealand. And well, it is getting very close to the free trade across. The main, since we are from the universities, I think it's a little bit. Well, there is a big necessity to have some kind of science behind. And my proposition to when we approach such situations, on the perspective and on a strategic way, to have three dimensions: theoretical, structural, and operational. I will explain what each of those dimensions means. Theory, that's Plato and Professor Martin Holland. Indeed, we need to have some theoretical framework to understand, and I think, from my point of view, the theory of regionalism is perhaps the best that can explain the situation in Asia Pacific for us to benefit. So, yeah, very quickly, there is a significant intergrouping interactions in Asia Pacific, and they have few moderators. From the academic side, I guess, can be picked up fairly easily. Napoleon Bonaparte would have been incredibly happy to see that his prophetic words became reality when he said that China, that was a while ago, he said that China is a sleeping giant. So he, of course, it's to be no longer a sleeping giant. It is a giant. The growing sentiments about the Korean unification, whatever people might say, but it is getting closer. In fact, because it's not only from the point that the Korean government has got the Ministry of Unification, that's okay, but they are getting funds developed. They have already established a fund of about 50 billion US. They have a specific taxation, plus the Pyeongchang Olympics in 2018 is something that the Korean government is counting on to get the unification process very, very much underway. Japan, the Hatayama proposal, is a great speech of the Hatayama Prime Minister at the General Assembly of the United Nations, when he apologized for Japan's mistakes in the past. A very crucial call for Asia. That's something that is completely unthinkable, especially in the nowadays world, when there is an animosity almost everywhere. So he thought that it was a good time to say that Japan's mistakes in the past should not should not ruin the cooperation at present. ASEAN, great presentations before. It is a reality, and it is a good reality, in fact, that they are just about to establish ASEAN community by 2015, and it's very serious. We have even Singaporean students in my group, and they take ASEAN quite seriously, and with all the frequent visits to places like Singapore, I can assure that it is the case. The Aussie land, the green continent, where people play funny game called Aussie Rules. Nobody understands that game, but the Aussies are completely crazy about that. An interesting nation with a good slogan: "You have been to nowhere if you have never been to Australia." That is the case. Highly advised you to visit that place, which has grown up from the Oceania's shorts. It is no longer in Oceania in a way. They like calling the region where they are Australasia now. So Oceania is a bad taste thing when you go across the ditch from New Zealand. Ditch is the Tasman Sea, and they said, we are from Oceania. This is you are from Oceania, but we are from Australasia. New Zealand, despite the small size, 4 million people only, it is the world's largest milk and milk products exporter, having Fonterra, gigantic corporation that unifies about 20,000 farmers, and it's buying out milk producers around the world, including Argentina, Uruguay, Australia, China, everywhere, and it brings lots of technology, high-tech approach to agriculture. okay, we are skipping few things, and we are saying that, okay, regionalism rules in Asia-Pacific, and and Asia-Pacific is waiting to be discovered in depth. So what is the status quo? And this is where we get into the structural dimension, just remembering about a great man, Ortvin Sarapu. That's in fact the draw. Structural dimension is a high resolution snapshot of the reality, what we actually have at the moment. From the political, business, social, cultures, intercultures, how we react, how are we capable to react? I think ASEM, Asia-Europe meeting, is the well-established and the long-time going framework. So is it a framework? So is it the only? Well, at the moment it is in reality, and we are getting into the 10th consecutive meeting that will be held next year in Brussels, and there are some agenda already picked up. But from our side, Estonia. Is Estonia participating? Yes, it is. There are a few Estonian partners in this framework. So this Estonian Ministry of Education and Research, Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as you can see, the Students' Council, and the University of Tartu. One of the examples is last year's conference that was held at the University of Tartu under this framework. But is it? And this is why, of course, there is Asia-Europe Foundation. This is the only institute that is acting as a secretariat of Asia-Europe meeting, and this foundation is located in Singapore. But there are non-ASEM examples. Asia model. All major universities in Estonia, they know about that because it is uniting those three universities in desire to research Asian societies, economy, and politics. MA students, BA students, they can take the module subjects and enhance knowledge on Asia-Pacific. There are some other non-ASEM examples like Saaremaa Ökokylla. I gave a call to Hando Sutter, the owner of this business, yesterday, and I said, Hando, because I know him very well, and I said, can I mention your name? And he said, oh, well, I will be honored if you mention my name, because it is this business is connected to few large New Zealand businesses for quite some time, I think for about 8 or 7 years, and I was even communicating with Hando when I was in New Zealand. So we, I know that it's growing from strength to strength, using the most advanced agricultural technologies that New Zealand can provide, and it is using this here. And for the benefit of Estonia, distributing those really high-tech stuff around the region, the broader region. The great man who once said that the reputation of New Zealand, well, of course, I'm from New Zealand, I have to say something good about New Zealand. The reputation of New Zealand is positive. As one of the radical reformers in the world, that he said back in 2008 when I was interviewing him. Another example, PWP Management Consulting is a consulting business in Tallinn that has recently established this PNET initiative. It's only at the beginning of the process, but I think that's a great idea, just to make a kind of a pipeline between Asia-Pacific and Europe and establish as broad network as possible, or at least to contribute to some kind of network that has already been established or is getting established by Enterprise Estonia. Our university, Tallinna Tehnikaülikool, our contribution is probably modest, but nevertheless it is, again, every single year it's growing from strength to strength. So we have top hat lectures given by a few ambassadors. It was a much higher number of ambassadors, but those two, they represent Asia-Pacific, and the next two are scheduled for the next year, South Korean and New Zealand ambassadors. Then we have introduced the Asia-Pacific studies from the next semester. It's a course basically the introduction for our students to make them incredibly happy, because there is a request from a number of international students that I think we need to study Asia and Asia Pacific a little bit more. The textbook is getting done, a very long process, complicated, time-consuming, lots of contributors, but nevertheless that's in conjunction with our collaboration with the University of Canterbury. The world's first textbook is going to be done, and it will be done with an initiative that arrived from Estonia, from us. And the Japanese for beginners via Japan Foundation from next year, and the extensive strategic plan. This is a great grand plan that looks like this. I'm not sure how visible it's from here, but as you can see that 2013, that's the year is entirely dedicated to India and making connections in India. Then, of course, TTU has got a lot to do with China at the moment, as well as 2015 will be the year that we simply go into conquer South Korea. Hopefully there is no South Koreans here. Operational dimensions. This is something that, because I came from a corporate world as well as the academic system, and I would like to always unite this academic approach with some tangible results, because Estonia should get a lot from the collaboration, and this is, we shouldn't really hide this desire. We would like to get wealthier. And in this sense, that's the dynamics, of course, the dimension. This is the core methodological tool in finalizing the outcome from a practical point of view. So, I think we are in search for the system. Henry Kissinger would have been completely overwhelmed, I guess, if he had seen this. Once he said, when I call Europe, who do I call? When we call Asia Pacific in Estonia and for Estonia, who do we call? Do we call Riigikogu? Do we call Välisministeerium? Who do we call? In this sense, absolutely fantastic survey. It's not that because I was invited by Marko Mihkelson, but that was in reality a very, very good survey presented by Mr. Mikkelson's commission and his people. The strategy until 2025. I think it's a great document to start with, but we need a lot more working horses from Estonia to get engaged with Asia-Europe Foundation in Singapore, because they are almost asking for that. We don't have enough of Estonian presence in Singapore in this case. Institutionalization. To me, that will be probably one of the first steps to be made, because I think we should probably have some kind of units that is entirely related to gathering information on Asia Pacific. Well, why should it not be called Asia Pacific Foundation? Why not? Using academic potential, it's nice that we have some students here, like my former student Kaisa. She's now working at Välisministeerium, and students like that, they are capable of producing great results, academic results. So why can we not use, why can the state, the Eesti Vabariik, why can it not come up with a list of topics either Välisministeerium or Riigikogu is interested in, to have a research, so the students will not have a headache of creating a topic for themselves, but they will be given this and they will be guided by our capable supervisors and produce and basically kill two rabbits by one bullet. They will defend the thesis as well as present the result for the government and for the parliament as fait accompli. So we can't do that. We should use it. Otherwise our students will be just going elsewhere and forgetting about why they have been studying at universities. Then establishing a circle of key partners in the region. I think, 16 partners at the moment. It's a big circle, but there are some more equal, as George Orwell would have said, partners. And in that case, Singapore, South Korea, Indonesia, and Australia are looking very, very nice, to me at least. And this is what you are doing anyway, working with Estonian diaspora in the region, as there is a significant Estonian diaspora in Australia. I thought this is a funky slide, because this is how this Asia-Europe Foundation looks like. I made this picture when I was there last year in July, presenting my paper and doing some workshop activities. But the point is this is a little square, and across the square there is this building. That's APEC Secretariat. Everything is close and everything is interconnected. So once we get here, once we get more active here, we will understand the larger economic picture a lot better, because they are contributing and they are communicating. And this is just to finalize. Saaremaa, this is the Öko-Külla, that's the picture. And this is, again, repeating this. Well, it's not that I'm homesick, but that's, I think it's a cool image. There are few similarities in those two images, as you can see. So, this is Whangaparao, a little peninsula, a few kilometers from Auckland, and this is Estonia. Well, that's a daytime. That's probably very early in the morning, so that's why we have some kind of light problems. But what are we waiting for? Thank you.
Thank you, Vlad, and thank you all of our contributors today. I think so very inspiring speeches and presentations. I picked up quite a few points already to work on in the future, but I would like to open floor now for colleagues and also the guests we have roughly 30 minutes to conclude our seminar today. Please, Mart, you first.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back to the beginning and ask a general question about how Asia-Pacific looks European Union. So how do you feel? What is a stronger feeling? Is the European Union a one body and one partner? Or what is a present situation? Or is a stronger understanding from past that the European Union is an old European Union, and other countries, East European countries, Baltic countries, are so-called former communist countries or former Soviet Union. So if you look at visa policy, an example in some countries, so there is a quite clearly divided European Union, old European Union, and other countries, like also in Thailand, an example. And so I also met such understanding that if they recognize that I'm from the Baltics, so almost never people ask me, are you from the European Union? But quite often they ask, are you from Russia? Thank you. Karin.
Yeah, thank you. Well, just to start with your note, when I lived in Southeast Asia and I always say, I'm from Estonia, they said, oh, you're from Australia. But that's to comment that. I feel, and that's the way I kind of feel, that EU, I would rather say that EU looks as EU. It's convenient to talk about EU, short word, and EU, and to break up the 27 states. It's a big number for Southeast Asia, and they are not used to, they only have 10 states in themselves. So there, within EU, definitely there are some countries that are less known and recognized, and obviously the ex-colonial powers figure high. There have been, during this 50 years of colonialism, or 100 years, or 50 to 100 years of colonialism, there has been there have connections established, and some of the connections still matter. Like, for example, France has special ties to Vietnam and other Indo-Chinese states, and Britain, well, follows closely what happens in Burma, Myanmar. So there is this, and obviously the founder states of EU, the big powerful states, feature much more highly in Southeast Asia as well. They are powerful. But I would also say that they have started to notice smaller countries as well. For example, in Tallinn University, we currently have an EU project that has 10 memberships. It's a EU-funded project with 10 universities, 5 from EU and 5 from Southeast Asia. It's a research project. We had a first kick-off meeting in Thailand in February, and our Thai partners expressed they were happy that they said that they are very happy that Tallinn University is included, and there was another one from Italy, like 2 kind of more marginal areas. So there is a willingness, and those who follow politics or who are more detail-minded, they have noticed the Baltics as well. And I know your point about the visa policy, but I think in this, yes, Estonia was lumped together with the ex-Soviet Union. Well, it is an ex-Soviet Union republic. Well, particularly for Thailand, I know Thailand has a big. Well, yes, Estonia was lumped together because Thailand had a big problem with Central Asian people. Flowing into Southeast Asia and to Thailand, and that as a part of the visa policy, Estonia was also lumped together. But I understand that as of very recently, there is no visa to Thailand anymore. No? Still is. Got the wrong information.
Somebody else to...
Can I probably just a couple of... I think we should perhaps adopt a very business-style approach here. I mean, when you are getting some kind of feedback, so who you are, who you represent, you represent the EU, are you Estonia, are you not? As the very funny answer for you, I can represent the EU. It just basically for... It's completely irrelevant in case of making some linkages, because, for example, the European Union is very intergovernmental and the European Union is very supranational. When we get in depth explaining those difficulties to the Asian sides or the Asia-Pacific sides, it makes them completely crazy. So they will never get this. Because the sovereignty is still very much alive, I mean, as a concept in Asia Pacific, or at least in Asia and in the Asean. So I don't think we should probably too much get into explaining them. We should do what we are supposed to do. We should use our advantages in full. And that's it. And just not. I remember when Tinnu Loorberg, the honorary consul of Estonia in New Zealand, he said once, he's been battling for about 50 years already with New Zealanders who think that the Baltics and the Balkans, that's the same. So it doesn't matter what they think, as long as they bring a lot of money to Estonia, it's fine. And then people who would like to know more, they will know. People who will not care about all those divisions or not think about those difficulties and difficult concepts existing in the European Union, they will never get it. So this is very much irrelevant. Business style approach, and we will be going for gold.
Thank you, Vlad. Now I conclude the list of those who would like to ask or give a comment. I have 6 people in my list. And first, N, please.
Thank you. We had a very interesting and useful trip to Singapore and Indonesia. And one of the answers to your question, Marty, is that for our astonishing, during many meetings, local people told us that not only Estonia is enough visible in the region, but the whole European Union is not enough visible. So we have very much work to do. And nowadays in Singapore and Indonesia, Estonia is Skype and advanced IT technology. Nobody told us about singing revolution. Nobody knew Paul Keres, not Mr. Sarapuu and other very dear landmarks for us Estonians, though this is the reality. And one of the conclusions we made is that we need our embassy in the region. And evidently in Indonesia it would be perhaps the best, because when we told in Indonesia, Jakarta, that we have our trade 4 times higher with Singapore than Indonesia, the answer was, again, astonishing. It's peculiar, we were told, because evidently the products the Singapore has for you is produced in Indonesia. And my question is, you mentioned the ASEAN community. They call it Asian Union even, and it begins in 2015. It is a huge step ahead, so to say. What do you think, and what do you predict, especially living in the region? My conclusion is that the role of Indonesia will be considerably higher than it's today, because it's growing in every sense. And they have many problems. In Singapore, we noticed that they are erecting a military base and for the military air base. And we told, who are your enemies? And we got the answer that we are afraid of everybody living in the neighborhood. So there are tensions and there are possibilities. So about the Asian community, thank you.
Okay. In case of the ASEAN community, there is a slide that I skipped, but there was something I obviously wanted to specify a little bit more, and it will help me. It will help me to explain what I want to say. Just a moment. Just a moment. For example, from the community perspective in ASEAN, why is it doing this to me? I don't know. Okay, let's start again. From the community perspective. No, it's okay. Let's just leave it. Okay. What the ASEAN Charter at some point, it had a provision that the ASEAN will have the so-called sectorial ministerial bodies, which is like a quasi-EU commission. With that, they are forecasting to enhance this kind of community spirit. That's first. And secondly, Singapore, for ASEAN and for the whole Southeast Asia, Singapore is the only country at the moment to whom the other countries can trust in in case of finances, so Singapore is a cashier, I guess, as a holder of all major bonds and major financial linkages. Basically, this is London for Southeast Asia, at the moment, the two great drivers of this ASEAN region, which I think will, surprisingly, that's of course Indonesia, because Indonesia is in the engine of ASEAN and has always been, from that goes back from that neutrality status of Indonesia. But as well as Singapore. Singapore is playing the ASEAN game very, very, very much. Even though that is afraid of the extreme Islamic movement that is in Indonesia, it is afraid of China, it is afraid of India as well, and it's just a small nation, only 25 or 35 maximum dollars to get from one side of Singapore by taxi to another one. So in that sense, it's a mixed feeling, to be honest. And the view from the down under, from Australia and from New Zealand, the view towards ASEAN, people tend to think that ASEAN +3 or +6 might save the whole concept in the strategically forecasted future, because discourse in China is changing too. China is, in fact, as far as I can see, China has been traveling globally, introducing itself for quite some time on the global arena, but China has missed so many opportunities in Asia, and now it is returning back. And on the academic level and on the business level, China would like to return to Asia and do a proper homework on that. It can, of course, undermine the fact of ASEAN community, I mean, and undermine the status of Indonesia, and Indonesia is very much afraid of that. But if China let everybody know and make everybody aware that it will not be dominating, or at least will not do an attempt to dominate, the equation may change with the time. But it is, there are so many variables in this, and we can talk, a lot about this, I guess. Thank you.
I would like to make a point that Jakarta, that's where ASEAN Secretariat is located, as we know. There are about 60 countries that have exchanged diplomatic credentials with the ASEAN Secretariat and are having their permanent representatives in Jakarta, so including the US and Japan. And so Jakarta is increasingly being talked about as becoming the Brussels of the East.
So thank you very much. We have a short time left. Please keep your comments short and also answers as well. Please, Marianne is next.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm coming to your presentation, Vlad and Nigora, and one specific slide you had, ASEAN +6. And those +6 means two giants, one biggest democracy in the world and the other economy number 2 in the world. My question is, which of those, India or China, has more influence in the region, in ASEAN? And from European perspective, what is needed for us to, what kind of model, if those two giants close to ASEAN countries, could be like role model, if any? Maybe every single country has its own model and they don't care about China or India.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will keep it short. The ASEAN +6 is, it's at the moment it is more like an imaginary thing, imaginary concept, like BRICS, for example. So it's a kind of a made-up thing at the moment, because, of course, in the East Asia and the Southeast Asia, the voice of China is heard a lot more, because China is perceived in Southeast Asia as an achiever, and India is perceived as very much underachiever, because it's you know, when you visit few places in India and you visit few places in China, you notice a huge difference, of course. Plus, for the key players in the region, like Singapore, for example, India, despite it has a significant population of Tamils, but Tamils are only South India and Sri Lanka. So India is not really visible. What about the framework? The framework for you know, for us to have a look and maybe to toy with those concepts. What plus is better? In case of the European Union as a whole, I think the European Union should probably carry on working quite closely with ASEAN, just ASEAN, that's 10 players, because ASEAN was the first, it was exposed in Asia, it was the first international arrangement that was exposed to the European integration, because it made an agreement with Europe, being basically the first agreement European Economic Community concluded with anybody in that particular region, and that was ASEAN. As for those pluses, I think we should probably need we need the regional powers to make up their minds first, I guess, while doing our own job, where we can get as much return as possible. And once they, you know, without really trying to forecast too much which plus will be prevailing, +6, +3, +3 is looking a lot more logical. +6, it's just a concept. It's a brick style thing, and lots of people laugh about that, because when the Aussies are going to meet those ASEAN plus, Australia wants to be perceived as the Asian power as well, but it's getting rebuffed almost immediately. Say, okay, you are not one of us. You are not really with us to play the game. Just play the game elsewhere, but not. So it's a difficult concept, ASEAN +6. Why I mentioned that? Because for us it's easier to basically narrow the scope of activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Raivo, please. Next.
Sorry, actually I'm a bit confused because we've stayed very much with the political dimensions, but not very much on economical dimensions. Actually, out of these countries mentioned in the region, majority of them actually are perceived or predicted being economical drivers for the next 40, let's say, years, or whatever analysis you take. So those countries like Indonesia, like Thai, like Philippines, like Vietnam, they are ahead of anybody. And the second point is that this economical dimension is basically about those countries getting much, more influential singularly and in combination against the rest of the world. So we can see also that the growth is the driving force of the nation. What we are talking about in relationship with Europe, not mentioning European Union, just Europe, far distant Europe. It's more about the economic benefits. It's about the transfer of know-how. It's about the collaboration in knowledge-based economy. Something which is very much economical dimension-based, not political dimension-based. It's not about value policies very much. Actually, they are interested. Whether we like it or not, we have to admit it and say it very open. Look at the developments. For example, the intra-regional trade within the larger basin, I'm not talking only about Asean in this case, but the larger Asian Pacific basin, it's switching now. Europe used to be the largest client, not anymore. The growth rates of intra-regional trade are enormous, actually. And crisis has actually very much, accelerated this trend. So it's natural trend which has been accelerated by the crisis. So therefore, I would very much argue about the political dimension, and I would stress more on the economical dimension first. Secondly, we almost completely, except the first presentation, a bit the last one, have skipped the geopolitical dimension. Whether we like it or not, but actually taking into account the Chinese factor, the Great China logic, the importance and the influence of China, the historical background, and also the diaspora of Chinese who are in key positions in the region's economics. I think that this is something which is very much bothering the local societies, even more than any other issues sometimes. And therefore, I would be very cautious to exclude this dimension at all, like it has happened so far. And on the other hand, taking these two things together, this economical dimension and this geopolitical dimension, we will see that US is much more natural collaboration partner for the region than Europe has been for a while and will be in the foreseeable future. This is something which should be taken into account. Considering Myanmar, I think that the containment, which is very much the issue now in the US, whether they talk about it or not, and which is in some kind of interest of the regional countries, it's also about the Indian Ocean basin. And it's all about Myanmar, whether we like it or not. Therefore, it was a kind of race I was witnessing myself being in Myanmar a couple of years ago, right after the visit of State Secretary Clinton, when I saw 3 days queue staying to see the relics of Buddha being presented immediately by Chinese to Myanmar people. So it's about fighting for the access, fighting for the influence, and fighting for the containment in a sense. So basically, I think that this region is very interesting economically. It is foreseeably rather politically stable for foreseeable future. And therefore, we would probably be wise enough to, if we will go for the economical part and not stress so much on the rest of the politics in relation to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Raivo. Would somebody comment on that, please?
Would you like to comment?
Yes. The background. I see geopolitics as the background where everything else is unrolling, including economic ties and with this 15 minutes, no time to go more into details. But obviously, economic trade, ASEAN itself is it's an economic union or alliance more than anything else. They talk about trade and business within, and as a partner, as a partner to rival China, as a big power, ASEAN trade is going on. Free trade agreements being agreed bilaterally and between China and ASEAN. So definitely, and yes, I do have some numbers from Asian Development Bank report of 2011 that also stresses there are a few countries, especially Indonesia, but also, in that ranking, amongst the countries that will rise and to prosperity, so to say, China was first, and India second, and Indonesia was third, and other countries mentioned Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam has been also mentioned as a rising factor. So I fully agree that trade is very relevant. And this ASEAN-China free trade area that went into force 2010 is a very huge trade bloc. What else?
I don't know whether I have time because it's already 11 o'clock. No, I don't. No? Do I? Well,
question.
Okay, well, one comment. Thank you very much for that. Well, in my case, I pretty much understood my task to give a presentation on the best possible approach for Estonia, how to get engaged. So that's why I didn't really specify lots of things related to political economy. Plus, I mentioned this nice-looking survey that the Commission for Foreign Affairs of the Kogu presented, and there are so many diagrams there that show in the economical side, so it's more or less irrelevant. And then that. In case of the geopolitics, as well as the political dimension, I don't think Europe at the moment, Europe as a whole, is stressing politics too much when it deals with China. And because Europe is indeed noticing that this interregional trade is really booming. And for example, from the New Zealand point of view, at some point European Union was the partner number 2. It's no longer. It's partner number 3 at the moment after Australia and China. So yes, it is. It is getting noticed. No, it's just because the short period of time that was given for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Flan. Please, the final question.
Yeah, thank you. Just 2 comments, and I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. First of all, concerning the perception of Estonia and the European Union in Southeastern Asia, I have a very recent direct experience. Just 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to teach a short course at Southern Taiwan University, and I was very pleasantly surprised about the knowledge of the students and also the faculty of Europe and the European Union, and they had no problem whatsoever of remembering where I'm coming from and where is Estonia located and so on and so forth. And these were not political science students who are obliged to know these things. These were business students. So the situation is different, and I very much hope it's moving on the positive direction. Now the other comment, I would very shortly like to elaborate what Vlad said in his presentation, for those who don't know that I am actually the head of a department where Vlad belongs to currently, so I think I have the authority to elaborate a bit. Vlad mentioned the Asian module that we have developed and with Tartu and Tallinn University, and actually this activity was chaired by Karin very efficiently. In principle, the module is ready and is working, but the project is still ongoing. Anyway, the project will end also in 2015. And currently we have a plan to apply for a continuation of that, and we have the feeling, all of us, the 3 partners, that we need something bigger. The module is not enough. We need to develop a whole program on the master level, perhaps concerning Asian studies, and of course, as Vlad is with TUT currently, we have decided that the Asia-Pacific focus would perhaps be our responsibility. Then Tallinn University will perhaps more focus on cultural and linguistic issues, and Tartu on their strengths, but we still are discussing that, and I very much hope that there will be a support from the Ministry of Education and Research and perhaps also other key institutions for such development. And as we are actually, our department belongs to the, as we say in English, Tallinn School of Economics and Business Administration, that is actually Tehnikaülikooli majandusteaduskond, so the economy will definitely be part and parcel of our interests, so we will not going to avoid that. We would rather be bringing that into the very center of these academic, but not only, hopefully, academic developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would somebody have final words before we conclude? Karin, maybe?
Not to summarize, maybe, but just to add to this economic aspect. I was stressing this European know-how and what ASEAN wants from EU. Well, and also in parallel talking about EU not being the very important strategic partner in Southeast Asia. For EU has always been the provider of the world's largest provider of humanitarian development aid, and this is the card at the disposal of the EU where it does already have an advantage. And that's why this is something that EU is, I feel, is pushing to compensate for the lack of geopolitical weight that it has in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, would you like to?
Final comments. Okay, there was only once mentioned Myanmar in the talk, and from my side, true. Geopolitical issues are the key, perhaps even to what will happen with Myanmar in future. And I didn't mention these things at all. I tried to concentrate on what is going on in the country. Therefore, yeah, true. And China is active, and the United States is active, and then European Union is going in there strongly. So future will tell us what will happen there. But the comment was really a good one. Thank you.
Just one little comment. Thank you very much for the invitation. You know, as you have noticed, perhaps that from year to year, more people arrive to Estonia to make a difference, to play for the T-shirt, I guess. You know, it would be nice if we keep this momentum going. Our interest is just to work for the benefit of this country, and thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to conclude with a few comments. First of all, I really would like to thank all our presenters, because we specifically today asked to get sort of broader view, few first comments on the issue of Southeast Asia. Because this seminar kind of is the first one we had so far, and I promise that this is just the beginning. I think that from here on we can go and to be more focused on different issues. I think so. If to pick up a few of the ideas, I think so. Yes, what was argued and what we have done greatly during our visits to the region as well. Yes, trade, economy, extremely important, and we, let's say, focusing on our own economic growth in a future sustainable one. We have to enlarge in our export basket, obviously, the Southeast Asian or Asian, so the part. But I think so. What was actually mentioned by Triinu in her presentation, we today also starting to think about post-2015 program for our development aid programs. And I think so what is, like we heard, actually our NGOs are absent at all from the region, from partly there are different reasons, but I think so this is quite forth to think about. Can we do something there? And obviously, one of the question was, or just points that we could be much more or well presented in Southeast Asia if we could have at least one embassy in the region. We, as you know, we have 3 embassies in Asia currently: India, China, and Japan. Starting from last year, actually, we have a non-residential ambassador to Southeast Asian countries, also for Australia and New Zealand together, Mr. Unga. I think that this is quite urgent for Estonia to really consider to have this position not in Tallinn, while in region, and obviously 2 main candidates for Estonian embassy in the region are Singapore or Indonesia, and this is where I hope, together with Foreign Ministry, we we give some focus on as well. So very importantly, also what was mentioned today is the knowledge about Asia Pacific here in Estonia, to give opportunities in for students at universities to study, for Estonians, for internationals, and to create more context. When we were in Singapore, we also visited Asia-Europe Foundation, and actually we saw that there are more opportunities for us to have more contacts with different organizations, plus with think tanks as well. So I think that from this point on, we in our Foreign Relations Committee certainly will come back to the topic and will more focus specifically on the issues either on geopolitics, economy, or, for instance, possibility of our NGOs to interact in the region. Once again, thank you very much for all participants, and for this time, this seminar is over. Thank you.
Thank you.